Hi, this is Donna. In today's video, I'm going to be making this handbag style gift bag. This was inspired by a bag made of felt, which I saw on Pinterest, which was described as a baguette bag. The bag is 10 inches across, it's 2 inches deep on the base, and it's 6.5 inches high. I've made the bag this size to maximise A4 cardstock, but of course you can change up the bag as you so wish. This is the only project I've made, so there are a few things that I would do differently on another bag and a few things to consider, which I have obviously found out as I've put the bag together, and I will, as always, point those out in the video as we go along. So let's put the project together. We'll start by making the front and the back of the bag. We'll then make the sides, but you will see that depending on the shape you make your sides, you may then need to adjust the size of the front and the back. I would suggest that you watch the next few minutes of the video and then you can decide whether you want to make your sides first and then calculate the sizes of your front and back, or you're happy to make the front and back first, make your sides, and then adjust this piece if you feel it's necessary. The front and the back piece for my bag, you'll need two pieces which are 11 by 8 inches. And on one piece, you'll score along the long side at 1/2 inch and 10.5 inches. And on the second piece, which is 11 by 8, you'll score on the long side at 1/2 and 10.5 inches. And on the short side, you'll score at 1/2 inch. We're going to use the score line on the 8-inch side of one of the pieces to line up the two pieces together. Secure that with tape or glue, and then we will fold and burnish what will be the top and bottom side seams. So decide which adhesive you think is going to be best for you. I'm going to use tape. So we don't want to burnish this score line. This is just to give us an indicator so we can make sure that the two pieces join up correctly. So remove the backing and join up the two pieces. So I want this top edge to sit on the score line that's going to run horizontally, and at the same time I can line up the edges of my cardstock and the vertical score lines. So this one piece is going to create the back and the front of the bag. Now I'm going to fold and burnish the side seams, as it were. So we've now joined up our two pieces, and the next thing I'm going to do is within the top and the bottom seam from the left hand side, I'm just going to make a light pencil mark at 7 3/4 inch. So that's halfway across the length of this piece of cardstock. So this is just to help us when we add our side pieces in. So I've just put a light pencil mark in there, and I'm going to do the same in this seam at the bottom. We'll put that to one side and come back to this once we've worked out our side pieces. We're going to make our side pieces, and I'm going to make a template out of this piece of packaging. This is 3.5 inches by 6 3/4 inches. I've marked along the top edge with a pencil at 3/4 inch and 2 3/4 inch. And then I've marked down the sides at 3 inches. What I'm going to do is manually, I'm going to draw a curve into one side between the 3-inch pencil mark and the pencil mark on the bottom edge. And this curve I want is going to be for the base and the sides of the bottom part of the bag. So put that into whatever shape you so want. So I'm quite happy with that. And again, you can adjust this up with any of the bags you make. So you might want this bottom section here to be shorter, so the base is not so wide. You might want your curve to run higher. But all of these adjustments you make are going to affect the length of the piece for the front and the back. So I'm happy with the curve on that side. So I'm going to cut that curve away. So that's how the side profile of the bag is going to look. And then I'm going to use the piece that I'm cut away, line it up with the bottom corner, line it up with the edge, and I'm going to draw around that so that my side piece is as near as I can get it symmetrical. Now you may have a shaped die that you want to use to get your curve, so do whatever is going to create the look that you want. So I've got 2 pieces of cardstock which were the same size, and I'm simply going to lay this on and use this packaging piece as my guide to cut the shape that I need. Do make sure that you use a sharp pencil, or you could even use something like a score tool to just go around the edge and mark your shape. So that's my 2 side pieces. So we're now going to use this to put the cuts and the serrations into our main bag piece, and just see whether we need to adjust the size of our main bag piece or not. I'm going to start by measuring the distance across the bottom is 2 inches. So I'm going to make a pencil mark lightly at 1 inch and do that on both. So this pencil mark is going to line up with the pencil mark that we've put on the seam. And at the same time, I'm just going to measure down, and my curve starts at 3 3/4 of an inch. So we'll work on one side at a time. I can measure 1 inch to the left and to the right of my pencil mark on the front and back portion. There and there. So this is going to adhere like so. And then I'm going to measure down from the top edge 3 3/4 of an inch. So make a pencil mark here and do the same from this end. 3 3/4 of an inch. So this portion here is going to be the bottom of the side. And this portion between this pencil mark here and this pencil mark here, I'm going to cut as serrations, like so, so they can go around the curve. So I'm going to measure exactly the same size on the other end. I'm going to work on one side at a time. So I'm going to start by cutting directly up to the pencil marks which are going to create the base, like so. I can cut down to this pencil mark on the left and then start to cut some teeth. Like so. Just going to take a wedge off of there. Then we can do the same. I now want to check before I do any proper gluing that the side panel is the right length, or whether I'm going to need to cut the front and back panel or cut the side panel. I've used a few glue dots, which are obviously temporary, to secure the side panel onto the glue tab here. I'm going to just hold this in place, lift this panel up and just manipulate the piece. I'm not sticking it, I just merely want to make sure that everything is going to fit or what I need to adjust. So that's going to come around like that. So that's going to come around like that. That's meeting in the curve. I'm just doing it with my fingers and I can see that my side panel is slightly too long, so about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to just mark that with a pencil. I'm going to chop that amount off of the top edge of both side panels. I'm going to finish the cutting on the side sections of the main bag piece because I know now that both side pieces are going to fit. So it is a bit fiddly, but that's because we're working with curves and obviously everyone might create their curves slightly differently. And then I'm going to take a slight wedge along the top edges like so. The next thing I'm going to do is add my pattern paper onto the front and back panels and onto the side pieces. So for the side panels, obviously we've got the shape. So I'm going to make my patterned paper template the same size as the sides because obviously I took 1/8 of an inch off. And then I'm going to cut an additional 1/8 of an inch off all the way round and then use that as the template for my pattern paper. So here you can see I've marked all the way round 1/8 of an inch, done this bit freehand, use my ruler for this bit. So I'm going to cut around that pencil line and use that as the template on the pattern paper for the two side pieces. I've added the pattern paper onto the front and back, and I did decide to add it onto the whole section. So it's 9 3/4 inches this way, and then you need to decide whether you want to add it onto the whole piece or stop it where the base would sit. And I've also added the pieces onto the two side panels. So we're almost ready to stick. We're just going to add in a couple of score lines into the side panels. And what we're going to do is at 1 3/4 of an inch across, we're going to score down to 3 3/4 or to where your curve starts. So if you've changed where your curve starts on your cardstock, this is where we're going to score down level with this. Now, in terms of the front bag and base, what you can do if you want your base to be more defined and have less of a curved look, as it were, is score between this point here where the center glue tab starts directly across. So that is going to give you a flatter base. Or you could decide to not have such a fixed form base, as it were, but cut another piece of cardstock which is the width of the bag and then would be 2 inches wide, and that could sit inside the bag where the base is. So you have a couple of options. I'm going to just line my piece up here. So with my edge against the side of the scoreboard, I'm going to just score straight across through the cardstock and the pattern paper at 6 3/4, just from side to side. Turn it around the other way and do the same. This is one of those projects where I'm only making one, so things come to mind as I go through the construction. So I am going to just gently burnish along that score line. But then what I do want to do is try to add a curve in between the serrated edge. So I'm just going to do that gently with my fingers, because obviously now I've got cardstock on top of paper. I've also used construction glue, but I do find if I just lay my hand on and just gently manipulate the cardstock, I can start to get a curve in there. And now we're ready to start to add on our sides. I'm going to start off by adding red liner tape on this bottom section so I get a nice instant fix. So I'm going to use red liner tape on this top section as well. Let's add quick grab glue onto the teeth. Then I'm going to manipulate the bottom part into place, pushing the teeth against the side panel, like so. Get rid of any glue, that's good. Let's take the backing off the tape, which is sometimes the most difficult process. Tip it up and just push those teeth down. So that's good, that's worked well. And now I'm going to do exactly the same on this side and then the same at the other end. So I'm using tape on the straight parts of the tab and glue on the others, but everybody will have their preferred adhesion method for this type of project. Other sides are on. I'm going to just gently push against the score line in the side and start to push the sides together. And that's how it looks from the side. And we're now going to add on the lid flap. We'll go through the shape of the lid flap that I've made and the addition of the slot, but you may, depending on the closure mechanism, you might want to skip the slot part. So for the front flap, you'll need a piece 10 inches, and mine is 5 inches long. The first thing is along the 5-inch side, we're going to score at 1/2 inch. So this is our glue tab. I'm going to flip the piece over and work on the back, because we want to put some pencil lines in and I want to be able to remove these. So I'm going to start by drawing a pencil line lightly at 5 inches. I'm going to do the same at 2.5 inches and 7.5 inches. Rotate the piece and I'm drawing a pencil line from top to bottom at 2 3/4 inches. Do the same at 3 3/4 inches. Rotate the piece back, we're working on the long side again. We're then going to put the lines into this section here. So start by moving your ruler to 2 inches and you're going to draw between the pencil line, the first horizontal pencil line and the second horizontal pencil line. So that will give you this pencil line here. Move your ruler along to 3 inches and you're going to draw from the first horizontal down to the bottom, like so. Move your ruler to 7 inches and draw from the first horizontal pencil line down to the bottom, and then move your ruler along to 8 inches and draw between the two pencil lines. So you'll end up with a piece that's got these pencil lines. And again, you can change the length, the width of any of these, change the shape of the piece, etc. This is just to give you an idea as to how I've put mine together. I'm then going to put my ruler on the 5-inch pencil line and make a pencil mark on that vertical line at 3 1/4 inches and 4 1/4 inches. And this is to indicate where we're going to cut the slot for the closure. The next thing I did was I cut myself a 1-inch circle. and I'm going to use this to create the curved look above this section here. So I'm going to line the circle up. So the outer edges of the circle are on the downward lines, and I'm going to join up the tops of the two lines. So this is just creating the curved edge that I'm then going to put into the piece. I'm then going to do the same. Now you could keep these square if you want. It depends on the look that you want. So we can now cut this into place. I'm going to start just by folding and burnishing along the top score line. So I'm going to have the piece in this orientation. I'm then going to use my corner rounder and round off all of the corners. I'm going to take a wedge from the ends of the glue tab, and then I'm going to cut a slot between the two pencil marks on this back section. So I'm going to move slightly to the left of the vertical line and slightly to the right of the vertical line, and I'm going to cut slightly beyond. I would rather the slot be too big. And again, this is optional. You may not want the slot closure at all. You may have something completely different in mind. Now I'm going to rub all of these pencil lines out. I think that because of the pattern paper that I've used, and this is got a textured look to it, this base cardstock, I'm not going to add any pattern paper to this flap because I don't want it to take away from the look of the bag, as it were. If, however, I was going to add pattern paper onto this, I would cut my pattern paper to start with at 10 inches times 4.5 inches. I would then lay this on top of that pattern paper, draw around the shape that we have, and then I would reduce each side by 1/8 of an inch all the way around and create the patterned paper piece much the same as I did with the sides of the bag. You can then stick that into place and then recut your slot through the pattern paper from behind. I'm going to use red liner tape again just because I have that to hand. And then decide which you want to have as your front or your back of your bag, and the lid is going to sit on the inside of whichever is going to be the back. So I'm going to line the score line up with the top edge of the back of the bag. So that will come down over the front like so. So now I'm going to go ahead and position my closure and my handles and the rest of the decoration of the bag, and then I will go through the measurements with you. So here's the finished bag. I've added on all the additional elements, and there are a couple of things that I would do differently, in particular to the handles. The handles are up from strips of cardstock which made the total length 20 inches, and I've added cardstock together to add some strength into these. So you can see that there is a join at the top here. So the first thing I would do is I would try to cut the cardstock so that the join was in maybe a slightly different place, so that I could then maybe add a feature of it by adding a bow or something over the join. Here the join is going to be covered when you hold it, so it's not so much of a problem, but I would perhaps try and change this particular element up. And in addition, the strips of cardstock I cut were 7/8 of an inch in order that they could fit within this gap. With the benefit of hindsight, I would cut these to maybe 3/4 of an inch or if I wanted 7/8 of an inch handles, I would have this gap slightly wider. The straps are rubbing slightly. It's not causing too much of a problem, but it is something that I would do differently next time round. So as you can see, I've added the handles on to both the front and the back. I scored away from the end at 1 inch just so that this handle could be moved up and down out of the way, and I rounded off the ends. I made a feature of the slot by just adding a gold surround over the front, and I actually stuck that in place and then cut through from the back the slot into the front of the gold cardstock. For the closure, you can see this comes down like so, and then the two circles pull apart to create the closure mechanism. So I have a circular piece for the base, and then I've used a circle die to cut from the pattern paper, and then I've got two just under 1 inch circles which I scored at 2/3 of the way across, so there is more coming through the slot than there is sitting on the base. I did use gold cardstock, and I did try it initially with two circles stuck together this side and two stuck together that side. I found you couldn't get enough of a burnish in the score line for the mechanism to then sit flat enough on the outside once it had gone through the slot. I have therefore just coloured the underside of the gold cardstock, which was white. I've coloured that with a gold marker, so that will just come through and sit like so. Overall, I am really pleased with how the bag has come out, and I do think it's something that I might make again in the future and maybe make a mini version. So there we have today's project. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing to the channel. And until next time, thanks for watching.